to welcome everyone to this edition of Active Voices. Yes, we are here live and back on YouTube. We appreciate everyone who's migrated over to Age of the Nerd to sit down with this very unique interview program. Those of you who are familiar with our previous versions on the podcast will be glad to see that we've finally transmitted everything over this way. And today, we're very fortunate. We're going to be sitting down with a wonderful creative who's really right in the middle of a lot of very interesting projects. Some of you may be familiar with his work from such projects as Arcanium and Transformers Armada, Shadow Law, as well as the work that he did on WATSON and HOLMES, for which he was nominated for a 2014 Eisner Award. He also was the producer, director, and writer of the documentary Brave New Souls, Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Writers for the 21st Century. And perhaps most intriguingly, coming up, he is going to be also doing work for Transformers Deviations for IDW Publishing, as well as writing part of Marvel Comics Civil War II arc. He's bringing back a beloved name from the past in terms of those of us who were reading comics in the 80s and 90s. They're bringing out a new edition of Night Thrasher. I'd like to welcome to this edition of Active Voices, Brandon Easton. Brandon, how are you today?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm doing great. How are you feeling?
Doing good. I appreciate the time and was very excited when I got the presser through about the work that you're going to be doing on the next variation of Civil War. And if you can spill some beans, we'd be interested to hear a little bit about what the new Night Thrasher project is going to be like.
Well, I can't say too much because, Marvel hasn't even released a whole lot of information about Civil War II. But we do know it's going to be Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, versus Tony Stark, Iron Man. And as far as Night Thrasher is he turned actually doing the Contest of Champions miniseries a couple of months ago. And when the opportunity arose for me to get a short story at Marvel, I immediately pitched Night Thrasher because he was probably my favorite African-American hero, and still is my favorite African-American hero that Marvel ever produced. Nothing against Black Panther, who I have no issues with at all, or Luke Cage, but I've always felt Night Thrasher was a more, in my mind, realistic black guy. So just happened to have some money.
Yeah.
So I jumped at the chance and I pitched a couple of ideas, and thankfully the editors responded, and you're going to see Night Thrasher show up and make a decision about his involvement in Civil War II during that particular issue.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about his kind of place in the lexicon of African-American superheroes.
Right.
He kind of was a guy who was a little bit of a change-up. He wasn't, shall we say, the urban hero. No. He wasn't even a super-powered guy, but he kind of had a kind of interesting mix of all sorts of things. He was a great martial artist, a guy who had some technological means, was kind of a savvy guy, a tactician, kind of an interesting guy, almost one that unfortunately was kind of offhandedly killed, in my opinion, at the beginning of the first Civil War, and it's interesting that Marvel's going to bring him back on the scene.
Yeah, I mean, Night Thrasher, Dwayne Taylor, to me, I always felt like he was a real, more well-rounded character. I mean, he wasn't ghetto, but he was definitely street in some levels. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And
then on another level, he was like a black Iron Man or a black Bruce Wayne because he was a family where he lost his parents, but those parents had money. He ran a Taylor Foundation by day and was Night Thrasher at night. I never liked the skateboard aspect of it, and that's something that we might have to do something about.
We get some folks on the skateboard a little bit.
Nothing against skateboarders, but I mean, particularly, I just didn't like. I just felt like a skateboard wouldn't be a good weapon for what he did. But anyway, that's another story. And I remember, I think the moment I fell in love with Night Thrasher as a character, and I can't remember what issue, but I swear it was either an early issue of New Warriors written by Fabian Nicieza, And Dwayne went to a Taylor Foundation event and ran into Angel, Warren Worthington III of the X-Men, who is blonde hair, blue eyes, and beautiful, and just happens to have white wings. And he got into this conversation with Warren Worthington, which was basically like, yeah, you might be a mutant, but you're still rich and white, so I don't really want to hear anything you have to say. And I was like, wow, I'd never seen anyone say that to anybody in the Marvel universe. It was such a really complicated but real thing. And I was like, you know what, this guy is awesome. And I supported Night Thrasher. I mean, I read New Warriors all the way up to almost to the end. I bought the miniseries that he had. And I've just been a fan, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to put words in his mouth and have him do some really cool stuff and reintroduce him to the Marvel universe of the 21st century. So again, I think we're going to see some really interesting new things from Night Thrasher in this story.
Yeah, I think he comes at an interesting time in the marketplace and maybe in the mindset of fandom. Something that perhaps we'll have a chance to touch on a little bit later. Would be remiss, though, if I didn't also ask about the Transformers Deviation Project that's coming up for IDW.
Well, it came out about almost 3 weeks ago now, almost a month, I'd say. It's been about a month. It was released in March, and it was basically what would happen if Optimus Prime didn't die during the 1986 Transformers movie. And it's an alternate version of, one of the greatest moments in cartoon history and definitely the greatest moment in Transformers history. Although tragic, it definitely had consequences for the greater Transformers world. And then when this opportunity arose to rewrite that, and I'm somebody who saw Transformers the movie in a theater. It was in August, and it came out on a Friday. And I remember that, I'm from Baltimore. I remember that the screening I went to, maybe no other screening was that packed, but when I went, it was packed. And it didn't stay in theaters very long, but I do remember the experience I had. Then I saw it 3 more times before it left the theater. So that was a hell of a thing. And to rewrite Transformers the movie is a great thing for me as a real old school Transformers fan.
Yeah, I was about to say is the IDW, their whole take generally has been really interesting because they've really allowed for some creative things to be done with the outside properties.
Right.
And I think Transformers is one of those things that it really, actually we're getting kind of several generations of Transformers fans.
Yeah. And
so if you go way back, like some of us do, the anime movie is near and dear to your heart. And I definitely think that that's something that a lot of the people who listen to the show and who check out Age of the Nerd will want to jump on, because old school Transformers still is in some ways the best. I don't have as much fault with the movies as some people, but I can't say it's ever outdone the show. As well as with the upcoming projects, I did want to touch with another subject near and dear to us, which was the Andre the Giant project that you did. That was up for the Dwayne McDuffie Award, and wrestling is again a near and dear topic to many people who listen to this particular show. How did you get involved with that? What was that like?
Well, what happened was I got hired to work with Lion Forge Comics, who financed and produced the book itself. IDW published and distributed it. But what happened is I got a deal with Lion Forge back in, I want to say, 2013, and I was going to write about 6 graphic novels for them, of which I think only 3 or 4 have been published. The other 2 are still, I think, in development. It's still in production in terms of artwork. One of the first things that they approached me with was a biography of Randy Macho Man Savage. And I've been a wrestling fan since probably 1982 or 83. And I've been following it. I mean, being from Maryland, I used to get not only WWF, but I also used to get Jim Crockett Promotions' version of NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, as well as UWF footage and Mid-South footage.
And old school.
Yeah,
old school.
This is I'm not joking. This is real stuff. I'm not one of these fake fans. I mean, and the AWA. I mean, I'm talking about real wrestling. Pacific Northwest, Florida, Georgia, Missouri back in the day. But so I know a lot about wrestling history, not just the in-ring stuff, but I know a lot about the actual people behind the scenes and what they do and how it worked. So I know a lot about Randy Macho Man Savage offhand. And then I think they tried to get the Savage or the Poffo estate to license the rights, and they were asking for entirely too much money. So then the next person on the list was Andre Roussimoff, better known as Andre the Giant. So through Lion Forge, I got a chance to meet with and speak to Andre's daughter, Robin, as well as, other members of the Andre estate on the legal side. So I had access to not only stories that had never been heard or shared before, but also had access to photographs that have never been seen or shared before. And some of that stuff ended up in the book, and obviously those stories ended up in the book. So it was a hell of a thing. I mean, I really enjoyed my experience. It was the first, and it's the only nonfiction graphic novel I've ever written. So it was a challenge for me on multiple levels, and I think that working with Dennis Medry, who was the artist, that was a great experience. I mean, that guy perfectly translated my script into visuals, exactly how I wanted it. So I can't complain. I mean, it was a fantastic experience, and again, I mean, I was, I've been overjoyed with the response, and as well as the way it came out. I mean, it's fantastic to me.
Yeah, I'd urge everyone who's checking out the video cast today, go grab a copy of this. If you love wrestling, but even if you're not particularly an old school wrestling fan, or you're just looking to get some more knowledge, or just are interested in reading a really interesting story, check out this. Again, the full version's coming from IDW, and it's Andre the Giant, Closer to Heaven. Really a good read, worth checking out. And along with that, you also were involved with the WATSON and Holmes run. You wrote the issue 6 of the line, and I was curious about how you were approached about that, and a project I know that I had a lot of discussion with about a lot of people around fandom, especially people of color who were buying the book. How did you get involved with that, and what was that experience like?
Okay. Well, what happened was the guys who published it, New Paradigm Studios, one of the guys named Brandon Perlow, who runs the company, him and a couple other people had reached out to me out of the blue. And it came at a great time. I mean, I was kind of broke and starving, and it wasn't just about the money, but I mean, it was a great time for me to get a job. You know what I mean? Okay. So they gave me an email, sent me an email, and then we talked for a bit. Then I met Brandon while I was in New York City one time for I forgot why I was in New York, but we met at Midtown Comics in Times Square. We talked a bit. He said he needed a one-shot story. Something that was going to be a little bit different, a little controversial maybe, or just something new that they hadn't done so far. So based on my experiences as a teacher in New York City and working with some really challenging students in the sense that they came from really horrible and rough backgrounds, and also knowing a lot about sex trafficking, from a sociological point of view, I was always keeping an eye on that as a teacher. I wanted to tell a story that involved sex trafficking and other issues that were kind of, starting to hit the mainstream. I mean, we have transgender issues starting to really hit. We're getting transgender actors, on mainstream shows. I mean, who would ever thought that, in movies too? So I figured that I would try to combine a lot of stuff that I'd heard while teaching in New York City, stuff I've seen myself in terms of, criminals being apprehended who engage in sex trafficking and human trafficking. So, all that was in the back of my head, so I decided to tell that story. And it was a lot of fun I'd never written a police procedural or a detective story in my life. And I wanted to give it a shot. Again, I mean, I'm always trying to do new things and trying to challenge myself. I don't always know how to, it's always good as a writer to try things that you haven't done before, just for the sake of being able to determine whether or not that's something you want to do in the future. And I think I would love to write a mystery, story sometime again in the future, maybe a graphic novel or even a novel. But I don't know when that's going to happen. But I definitely enjoyed Watson and Holmes. That was very, very, again, to run the theme, I was so great. I had great gratitude for being given that opportunity, and particularly one I didn't have to get. I mean, they didn't have to hire me. They didn't have to reach out to me. I just got lucky, I guess, and it worked out for the best.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole response to the series I thought was fascinating because it kind of was one of those things where it kind of filled a niche that, you might not even have thought was there until it showed up.
Right.
But then once it was in, it kind of, I know a lot of fans I talked to were like, this is the thing they need to adapt for a movie or for another format, this particular concept. I mean, we have, at least three contemporary versions of Sherlock Holmes out there, and Watson. And why not another adaptation? And I thought it was an interesting, the response I thought was fascinating because a lot of people were like, this is the way we should go. These are the type of comics in the marketplace that we should be kind of pushing for. And so I was curious on your end, where is your take on say things like adaptations of other properties and the changing of ethnicity or the working of characters in from different backgrounds into established properties?
I mean, that's a great question. To me, it's always been a double-edged sword because I don't look at it I no longer look at anything from a fan perspective anymore. Maybe that's a good or a bad thing. But working in the industry, you start to look at it from more of a marketplace-driven or a production-based standpoint. So when you're creating something, your reaction, or you're involved in the creation of something, your reaction to what's released is going to be a lot different than your average fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that to, say the average fan is stupid or anything like that. I'm just saying that you're privy to information and processes that the average person doesn't know about. So with that being said, I don't really care personally because I don't have a horse in any. I mean, I don't own these characters.
Sure.
I love a lot of characters, and this is nothing against anybody who loves. I mean, I'm a big Transformers fan, obviously, right? Now, those Michael Bay movies, I don't particularly care for at all. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but you're not going to see me get online and yell and scream about those Michael Bay movies. I'll speak about why I don't like them, like on interviews like this, but you'll never see me ranting and raving and cursing and getting all mad. I mean, it's like I have a life. I can go outside, I mean, this is not everything to me. I love Superman. And honestly, I didn't really have a problem with Batman versus Superman.
All right. Good to hear.
I mean, but honestly, I just don't care. Because it's like I went to the movie, I didn't write it, I didn't direct it, I had no hand in the development of that film. So I looked at it as a product. I'm like, okay, well, this is what they're trying to do. I get it. Okay, and I move on. Was it the greatest film? No, but it wasn't like this horrifying, hellacious thing that people were suffering. I mean, people are stupid, man. Some folks just go too far. And, the same thing with everything. I mean, I look at it, like, for example, Star Wars The Force Awakens. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You know what? I didn't have a problem with it. Now, I ran into a lot of people who were whining and complaining about it. I'm like, look, it's a product. Disney bought Lucasfilm to make money. It's not about the fans, and I hate to say that, and I always have to say this, and people never react well, but generally speaking, none of these companies care about what any fan thinks. They really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like Superman versus Batman, no matter what anyone says, that film is going to make $1 billion.
Yes. Yes.
When it gets on Blu-ray, it's going to sell extremely well.
Yes.
No matter what anyone said. The merchandising is selling extremely well. So it's like, yeah, if every comic book, I mean, and I'm going to say this, and I said this in a recent interview too, but if every comic book fan in the United States of America didn't go to support any superhero movie, that superhero movie is still going to make $1 billion.
Yeah, that's a sad truth.
and I wish, because I mean, you do the math, there's probably between 400,000 to 1 million active comic book buyers in the United States. And that's just all together. That includes everything. Trade, digital. It's roughly that number, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you do the math on that, if you take away 1 million movie tickets, you still have 99 million other people who are going to go see these movies globally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm sorry, all the whining and complaining. Look, I get people want to have an opinion. I mean, the internet has made everybody think their opinion is as important as the president's, but it's not. It's not. You know, like, the only way to really affect change is to either create your own stuff, which very few people ever want to do, or support stuff that's doing what you like. You know, that's why I made the Brave New Souls documentary.
Exactly the transition I think we were going to want to make is that leads exactly to the 2014 film that you directed and produced and wrote, Brave New Souls. And the topic of that particular film was where there is a core, a black fandom, other people of color fandom, if we can phrase it like that, and still there is this feeling that representation and response is not what it should be, even though there are people out doing work, and you address that very directly. And for those folks who perhaps haven't seen the film, what are some of the core issues that are going on there?
Okay, well, if anyone wants to check it out, it's on Amazon Instant Streaming. So you can either buy it for $9.99, I think, or rent it for like $4.99. And I think the rental lasts 48 hours. So Brave New Souls, Black Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of the 21st Century. Please check it out. I might even, every now and then I post it for free for like a day. So I might be doing that again just so people can see it. It's not about the money for me. I really want people just to see it so they can be exposed to other creators. So what happened for me, and this was back in as early as 2009, I started spending a lot more time. I mean, I was working, I had 3 jobs, but on those rare days I had off, I'd spend my entire day online just catching up to what was going on in the world or whatever. And I ended up in about 4 different black comic book fan groups on Facebook. And the thing that I had noticed was that I'd say 80% of the people who posted regularly, daily, or hourly even, all they did was complain about what Marvel and DC weren't doing for them, or what, well, first of all, Hollywood as a place is a small town in the middle of LA, the city of Los Angeles. Hollywood as an industry doesn't actually exist. People use that as a name for, the industry, but there's no real industry. It's a bunch of different big, giant corporations that don't work with each other,
right.
Making stuff for the entertainment, for the entertainment marketplace. But, I kind of felt like folks were constantly complaining and constantly whining about Marvel won't do this, and where's Black Panther, and where's blah, 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 and why aren't there any space empires filled with blacks, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, this kept going on and on and on. So I started to say, well, first of all, I started to meet a lot of black folks working in the entertainment industry. I met writers, and singers, and dancers, and actors, and TV producers and showrunners, and of all different, from all parts of the country, gay, straight, lesbian, whatever. I mean, I met all kind of folks. And I noticed that they were producing stuff that people didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. Or if you would post a link to it, no one would pay attention to that link. Like, if you posted an article saying, where are the black people, you'd get like 500 likes and 300 people would comment on it. And then when you would post something showing something that we were creating, it would get no likes and no comments. It would be completely ignored. And this even happens now. Okay. But it used to be really prevalent back about like 6-7 years ago, right? So what I decided to do with my meager money, and I had no money, I saved up pennies, everything I got to be able to afford the equipment. I borrowed lighting equipment from a friend of mine who was a filmmaker. I borrowed some other stuff from different folks. And what wound up happening was I started production of it, and the day I started producing it, my first day of interviews, nobody showed up other than the interviewee and me. Mm. And I had a bunch of folks saying they were going to come, and I had posted stuff online and blah, blah, blah. And everybody was like, yeah. But then when it came time to shoot, nobody showed up. So I had to shoot it, light it, and record sound by myself for every single shot in that documentary. And that's okay, because I learned a lot. I mean, my biggest regret is not being there when the guy edited it, because he didn't edit it the way I wanted it to be done. So he left out some really great stuff, and he the pacing was off. So unfortunately, it came out the way it did, but one day I am going to go back and re-edit it and make it look the way it's supposed to look. However, luckily, I was on tour with Lion Forge Comics, who are based in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was out in St. Louis, and we went to Wizard World Chicago a couple of years back. Then I was flying out to New York for conventions and stuff. So during this period of time, I was able to hit up creators in Los Angeles, St. Louis, Chicago, and New York only. There were people in other parts of the country who were getting really upset that I didn't fly to them, yet no one offered to help me, with travel arrangements. I'm like, I'm paying for this is my own money.
I was about to say, yes, this is all the budget here, folks.
Right, so I could barely afford the digital cards to record it on, let alone, flying to Deep South or other parts of the country. I couldn't do it. I'm sorry, anyway. So I put it together and I put it out. And for me, I don't react very well to people who don't believe in solving problems. I'm a big problem solver in my own life and in my career. I don't sit and fester in problems. And it seemed like, it's not everybody, but it seemed like there's I'd say about a 35% chunk of black geekdom that all they know how to do is complain. That's all they do is complain endlessly. And I'm always like, when you just, I can't curse, I don't want to curse, but it's just like, just, stop.
Stop. The nicest way possible, stop.
Right. It's like, the people in my documentary, some of these people are Hugo and Nebula Award nominees or winners. These are people who have been proven in literature, people who have been proven in TV shows, animation, comics, folks who have long careers despite having no black support whatsoever, luckily, somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And to see that these creators aren't getting the attention they deserve from African-American fans or any fans, really, it's really kind of pissed me off. And it still pisses, to this day, I'm still pissed off about it. And I try to fix the problem. I don't complain about it. I just fix it. And the only way to fix it is to keep creating and to keep promoting other creators of color who are putting out, not just putting out material, but putting out quality material. I'm not just trying to say anybody, who just decides to put something together is going to be, should be, get some sunlight. But it's like there are folks who are doing remarkable work that's getting ignored, and it's not right. And it's just bizarre to me, because I think that, and this is me getting really political real quick, but I think that the only thing that really holds black people back is the lack of economic, entrepreneurship with each other. It's not so much, because black Americans generate $1.1 trillion, so we're not poor, contrary to popular belief, but we actually generate $1.1 trillion a year, African Americans. So with that being said, it's like, why isn't 1/100th of a percent of that being spent on black creators? That's what I don't get.
Well, one of the things the movie speaks to, and something that I was surprised to hear. I mean, I've been around fandom of all types for decades now, and as a person who started off collecting comics in the 70s, I can tell you there weren't a lot of minority faces around. There weren't a lot of black faces around when I first started collecting comics. But you mentioned that in the film, it's mentioned that 1 out of every 5 persons who identify themselves as a comic fan today is a person of color. And I had to stop and think, whoa, that's a huge number of the market as it exists today. That's a number that has some economic muscle, has some some muscle to it. So, how do we get out of this spiral where it seems that we're dissatisfied with the product and actually get some results, as you mentioned?
I don't know. I mean, the only thing I think might work in the long term is for us to somehow get a larger marketing budget. I know we have to, because the only thing that really makes a difference is people heard of stuff, because I figured out that black geeks will not do any research. And
now there's a gauntlet thrown. I like it though. I like it.
But I've gotten into long, dark arguments. I mean, nasty arguments about this because, and then once again, I'm talking about that 35%. Not everybody, but that 35% that likes to whine, they don't do research. So if you say to them, why don't you just Google African American science fiction writers, like as a term on Google, they've never even thought of doing that because it's too easy to complain. I mean, we can learn anything we want in the 21st century, yet folks still get kind of stuck in this, oh, well, y'all got to find me, But yet these same folks will spend, 45 hours online learning Dothraki or Klingon.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the real solution, I think, we have to just find ways of marketing better. I mean, you can market for free up to a point on social media, and then after that threshold, you have to start spending money. And I think that a lot of us just can't afford it because we're not being supported. So, and the other side of it is that marketing costs a lot of money. I mean, your average Hollywood or big budget studio movie, that will usually cost $200 million, and then it'll cost another $100 million to market it. Marketing is expensive, and I think to market comics, you really got to spend a lot more money because comics, people don't know where to get comic books. I tell people they're comic book stores, and they look at me like I'm insane. So I think that the comic book industry itself has to let people know, like Marvel and DC specifically, has to do more of just on-the-ground marketing, like magazines and newspapers even. I know it doesn't make sense to some, but I think you would hit more faces. For example, when Ultimate Spider-Man #1 came out, how many years ago that was, in New York City, they packaged it with, I think, the New York Times or New York Daily News. I can't remember which one. But Marvel sent out like 1 million copies for free. And I don't know if that affected sales, but one thing it did was let people know that Marvel Comics still makes Spider-Man comic books. There are people who don't know that. So I don't know other than specifically for African-American creators, I think we have to start doing Black Book Expos. I think we have to start doing like AFRAM, like African-American convention type things. Show up in places where there are black people, and then market your material, have a booth, interact with people, give some stuff away too. You don't have to give your book away, but if you give a preview or some business cards or postcards or posters, give people stuff so they can remember you by it with your website on it, I think that the ones of us who do produce, we're not marketing enough with money, unfortunately. And that's the excuse that the complainers will give why they don't support us, even when they see links on the same message boards they post them. It's very strange.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, the film and your remarks here touch upon, I think, a mindset I think is changing a little bit in the 6 to 8 years since, you mentioned the process starting. I think we're getting a little closer to the idea of, well, let's not sit around and complain. Let's do what we do and start supporting it and start letting people know about it. And people who say, even when they do get a character of color, complain about, well, it's not very well done. Well, that's because you're not going to get well done from people who don't have a vested interest in doing it well. And I think that's also another thing hopefully we're seeing a change in, is that more than complain, let's take some action and let's actually start going out and producing and supporting those people who do produce the things we want to see.
Yeah, I have to say I was very happy with David Walker's Cyborg #1 in terms of the reception it made in the sales. The sales were pretty strong for the first issue at the very least. I like that Power Man and Iron Fist debuted pretty well, and I'm liking the fact that Black Panther, got international attention. So I don't know how long the sales are going to hold up, but at the very least, Marvel is starting to hire writers of color and women to tell stories that people say that they want. And I think that you're starting this, Miss Marvel is amazing. You have a editor who is Muslim, and then you have a writer who is Muslim, and both women. And I think that leads to a character that is so well-rounded and so beautifully crafted that, she gets so much attention on the critical side that she deserves it, And when you see that as a result, that should tell folks, this is what we got to do. We got to start putting people who have authenticity. And it's not to say that white writers can't write black characters. That's not true at all. I mean, Chris Claremont wrote Storm better than anyone has ever written Storm in the history of her existence. I don't think anyone's ever written Storm better than Chris Claremont did, And then Brian Michael Bendis has black characters in a lot of his work, and he writes them extremely well.
Sure.
So I can't, it's ridiculous to even think that a white or anybody, like a black guy can write a white character and so forth and so on.
Sure.
I just think that if you're going to tell certain types of African-American stories from the African-American experience, it helps to have someone who's lived it. Because there's certain things you're going to get. Like, I'm not a woman. Like, I think I write women characters okay, but I'm not a woman.
Sure.
And there's things about being a woman that I will never understand. And she could put that in her storytelling that, on a level that I couldn't even approach. I could try, but I'm not going to have the authenticity. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's important to get people who can tell those stories to tell those stories and make sure that they get a chance to really, don't do 2 issues and fire them. Like, give them like 6 or 7 issues or 8. People need a moment to catch on and figure this out. Comic book writing is not easy, and it takes, especially if you're new, you're working on a big book, an established character. You got to find your voice. You got to find the characters' voices. It takes a little while, and I find that some fans are way too hypercritical after like 5 pages. They're like, oh well, this, and I'm like, come on, man. Like, again, calm down, stop, give it a chance, see where it goes.
And I think you point, that's an excellent point, is that, if fans really do want to get certain results or certain elements discussed, one, they have to be receptive to a more broad spectrum of comic reading. I think one of the problems we see, too, is that the titles out, there are a lot of titles out, but we aren't getting the diversity of subject maybe as we once did.
Right.
But also, too, is you got to give a book a chance. You can't pick it up and say, well, this isn't like Batman, or this isn't like Uncanny Avengers or whatever, and I'm just going to put it down now because it's not exactly the same. It's like, well, this is why you get the same stuff over and over again.
Exactly. Yep. There you go.
So I've seen a bit of a shift. I won't call it a sea change yet, because I think we still are plagued, especially, I see a lot of the discussions about movies and television, and, you might have been privy to some of the Twitter anger over things like Sleepy Hollow and some of the things that happen. It's like, well, to be frank, unless you are watching the show in large numbers and being vocal about what you like, when they do moves like that, as you mentioned, it's not going to make a big issue to them. When you get mad about shows that are almost about to go off the air anyway,
right.
they're not really going to be too inclined to deal with you.
Yeah, you're right.
And along that lines, and I did want to touch on this because it really was, along with the other upcoming projects, this is one of the things that caught my eye about what's going on with your work, is that you were named one of the 8 finalists in the Disney ABC Studio Writing Program.
Yeah.
Out of 1,500 applicants to receive a 1-year position as a writer with Disney. And I'm just curious, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners would be curious about what that process was like. How did you get started with that, and how's that been as an experience, just kind of generally?
Man. All right, let me start at the beginning. Okay, well, there are several of these type of writing programs in the industry. NBC, Warner Brothers, ABC, CBS, Nickelodeon, HBO, NBC Universal, and I believe Fox. They're not specifically quote-unquote diversity programs. It is a stated goal to try to diversify the ranks, but anybody can apply and anybody can be selected as they have. There are plenty of white folks and other folks who have gone through these programs, not just blacks and Latinos, like they try to make it seem like. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. There are many of these programs, and they're all, You have various degrees of success. Now, the application process to these are usually pretty stringent. They're looking for folks who have some experience, but not too much. You can't have reached a certain level and then apply. So one of the things that you have to be aware of is that you have to write a really good sample, which is known as a spec script based on an existing show, which if you're a TV writer or a script writer, a spec script it's your sample as if you were writing an episode of whatever show it is. So it's not anything that will ever be produced or, bought or sold, but it's an example that you can create in someone else's voice, but still tell a unique story. Then you have to do a pilot, which of course is your original concept as a script. And, again, that's not always something that's bought. Sometimes they do get purchased and produced, but generally speaking, it serves as an example of what you can create for yourself. So some of these programs have some requirements that are not so tough, but ABC, I think, has the most tough requirements. So you have to create a pilot and a spec script. You have to get a letter of recommendation or two from industry people who know you and can vouch for you as a person and as a writer. Then you need to go through a very long application process where you write essays and personal statements and have a really good resume. And then you go into the pool of 1,500 to 2,000 applicants. Some people are immediately disqualified because they didn't follow the directions. And that's another thing, like they say on the application, if you miss any of these, you're not getting in because we're going to disqualify you because you didn't follow direction. So they want to make sure that they're getting people who are diligent as well as creative. They don't want folks who can create but then want to go walk in their closet and smoke weed for 36 hours. Like they need somebody who can show up and do the job as well as have a work ethic, as we say. So I applied. I went through the very lengthy and arduous application process, and then I got in. And then when you get in, you're given a contract for 1 year to work for ABC Studios or Disney Corporation, and during that time you go through a period of mentorship. You take the equivalent. It's not like you're taking classes, but you're taking the equivalent of classes every day, several hours a day. You get to meet with executives and producers and other people, and then when staffing season comes, and that's usually the period between now and the end of May when producers, writers, and showrunners are hired upon pilots or returning shows, when staffing season shows up, you then are put out there to potentially get hired by a show. And I ended up on Agent Carter, which is, a Marvel and ABC production. So that's how that works. And it's been a fantastic experience so far.
Once again, that's one of the reasons why I really was interested to touch on it, because it is a bit of a mysterious process to some degree from the outside. Even in the preliminary setup for this, it was kind of like trying to get clear exactly, you hear about these things, but you're never quite sure how they work on the inside. And so that's really interesting to hear about the process, and indeed it's a rigorous one. I know there is some misconceptions about who can apply and who gets accepted to these programs.
Right, yes.
But as you point out, this is a very wide field. This is, a couple thousand people who are wanting to get in to some very, I'm sure, this is a coveted spot. You can't just fall off the Apple truck. You got to have something going on here. You got to know what you're doing. As you mentioned, you definitely got to know how to follow instruction and direction to get stuff produced, because as I'm sure you can speak to, being on a show that's on a production schedule, you're working tight deadlines and things got to be getting done.
Yeah. I mean, the average day for us in the Agent Carter, I can't speak for every writing room because I've only been in one really. Well, actually, two. Well, not three, because I worked on the Thundercats and Transformers cartoon. But a live action 1 hour writing room is very specific, and every writer's room, regardless of what kind of show it is completely different. It's like a fingerprint. So it's a different collection of personalities, and they all run a little bit different. But the average day can start at 8 hours to 15, sometimes 17. And if you're producing, you could easily have if you're on set, if you're covering set as they call it, you can easily have a 20-hour day. You're not supposed to, but it can easily end up being a 20-hour day. I've seen things go that long. It gets real ridiculous. And, you got to be, like I said, you can't go in your closet and smoke weed for 36 hours. You got to be sharp and on point and just find a way to cross that finish line, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's a fascinating process, but I don't know if it's one that a lot of people understand well from the outside.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal, and this goes back to research. There are like 2 or 3 documentaries about TV writing. One of them is called Showrunners, and there's another one called Tales from the Script. And I have recommended those endlessly, and I don't know how many people actually sat down to watch them. But anyway, so the process is not really mysterious if you do the research, because there are message boards like Done Deal, which are filled with TV writers. There's TVWriter.com, which is filled clearly with TV writers. There's a podcast for free called TVWriterPodcast.com, where they interview, I think he's up to almost 100 interviews with different TV writers of all backgrounds. So if you do the research, and again, you have to do the research, you can find out all this stuff. But generally speaking, yeah, it is somewhat mysterious, but you got to really dig into it, because they're not advertising this stuff, because they don't want because everybody can't do it. You know, there's a very small population of people who can actually write television, and out of that, there's a very small population that actually gets hired at any given time. Sure. So things don't always work out. You know what I mean? So it's interesting.
Well, it as you say, it's the rigor is part of the experience. It's one thing to have creative ideas and to be able to maybe in some regard translate that to paper or to a wider medium. But then there's the other aspect about the discipline, like you say, getting your butt in the chair and having to get a show done in a time frame. Just making sure that you're you know in doing the things that you need to do just to be considered. And so I think it's fascinating because you know, kind of it's almost seen as kind of an arcane art, like you have to go and meet the Ancient One to do some of these things. But I'm glad that you know you and your experiences can kind of speak directly to people about what it really takes, because it does take quite a bit.
Yeah. I try to, you know, I do panels and stuff and at, you know, Comic-Con and all that stuff, and I try really hard to just like get the process, because like I want more people to get in who haven't even thought about it. And I think that just like when you're a construction worker or a lawyer or a police officer or a doctor, you need to know a little bit about the industry before you get into it, because once you get to a certain level, you start to require and acquire specialized skills. And it's a good idea to know what's going to be required of you. And I think the same way about military. You know, I have family who are military. It's like you don't go into an area unless it's been properly scouted or you have some intel on it. You don't ever want to go into a situation blind. And Hollywood can be warlike in the sense that it takes no prisoners. You know, people literally don't give a crap about you. You know, and it takes you have to move the needle really far in a good direction, to get people to even turn their head towards you, let alone get any kind of automatic respect. So, it's tough. It's tough. And it's tough especially when there's not only competition, but there's also just this general ignorance that exists where not knowing something will cost you everything. You know, like the one place you don't want to not know something is Hollywood or LA, you know.
Exactly. And again, it's kind of fascinating to kind of, you know, hear from your perspective what the process was like and what it entails.
Right.
You know, we've been very blessed for this hour to sit down with Brandon Easton. And Brandon, before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how people who are interested in finding out more about your work, or even perhaps contacting you, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they make contact with you and your work?
Sure. Well, first off, I'm on Twitter as @Brandon Easton, and then I'm on Instagram as Shadow Law Write, and that's Shadow Law ends with a W and then another W, RITE. I'm going to send you these links, and so you can, if you want to post it, when you post the interview, folks can just click on it if possible.
Wonderful. I would greatly appreciate it. And as you mentioned, Transformers, Deviations, is already out on sale, as well as Andre the Giant, Closer to Heaven. And keep your eyes peeled on this space, on Age of the Nerd, and elsewhere for upcoming information about Civil War II. And I'm sure we'll be hearing some more information about Night Thrasher sometime down the line soon. And is there any other projects or upcoming events that people should know about, or perhaps where they can contact you at?
Yeah, well, okay. There's a big IDW thing happening on May 2nd. And I can't say what it is I'm working on or anything like that. But on May 2nd, IDW Publishing is going to have their big, it's called Revolution. And you definitely want to be paying attention to IDW Publishing on May 2nd. And then this Thursday, which would be April 21st, there's going to be some photos put up of some special event that's happening with IDW. So, by the time this is published or released, hopefully the news will already be out. But if by now you've gotten the news and you have the news, so you already know what I'm talking about. But if you get this before May 2nd, keep an eye out. There is a huge announcement coming. So that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, so that's a great tease. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled. This edition will be dropping on the 25th, and so we'll be anxiously, if we haven't heard by that time, if we have, it'll be included with the posting. But if not, keep watching this space.
I got one more thing.
Oh, sure. Please.
I do a podcast. I do 2 podcasts, by the way. I should have mentioned. The first one is called Writing for Rookies, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a tutorial. It's free, where I talk about different elements of my career. I talk about writing novels, comic books, and television as well. And I also have a podcast called The Two Brandons that I do with fellow comic book writer Brandon Thomas. And we just argue about pop culture. And we have a lot of fun, and I think that folks would enjoy that if they take a look at it. So I'm sending you the link for the Two Brandons podcast. But both of these, Writing for Rookies and the Two Brandons, are both on iTunes. So, if you're a podcast listener, you'll slide over there. You'll get all kind of really good arguments and news that I don't release anywhere else. So check it out.
Check it out. And again, along with the YouTube posting for this, the posting will run here on ageofthenerd.com. And again, keep the eyes here for all upcoming news, especially you folks on State of Black Science Fiction and Afrocentric Film Collective. I think some folks have been put on notice. So definitely go and check out everything that's going on with Brandon. We appreciate you coming in for this hour and sitting down with us. It's been a great time. Hopefully down the road we'll have a chance to catch up as projects come up.
Cool. Anytime. Reach out. I'll be happy to come back anytime you like.
I appreciate it. I definitely want to sit down with you again. There's a few other things that I definitely want to get into next time. But appreciate again Brandon coming in here to Active Voices. We appreciate everyone tuning in this week. Again, we are now up on YouTube for those of you who have been following us from the podcast days. Please check out this YouTube page. Follow us at ageofthenerd.com. Follow me at sabbathsoldier.com. And we'll be back very soon with both Active Voices, 7-Minute Takes, and all the things going on here at Age of the Nerd, your home for all things pop culture. Once again, thank you for listening. This is your host, Jason Stewart, and I'll catch you on the flip side.